And if, in my opinion, if you have less than 100 customers, going to be one of the best social platforms actually right now. What that means is if demand is really high, customer acquisition cost is at its lowest point.
Hey everyone, Mike here. Another episode today, a little bit different. Usually I don't do a lot of interviews, but today we're talking to Will Young from Young Blooded Podcast. He's a new upcoming podcaster in the lawn care industry and wanted to kind of highlight him. But stay tuned because I share some really cool nuggets, especially if you're doing part-time in your lawn care business or if you're trying to get started in a very local market. There's a really cool tip I share about Nextdoor, which is a social media platform that I really feel is great when you're first getting started to be able to penetrate very deep in a very tight market. So stay tuned for that. I think it's a good one here. Some good questions he asked, and here we go.
So my one question that I emailed you about and was happy to see your response saying sure to was, how can I, by the end of this year, hire somebody that I can trust to do a good job of running my lawn care route here in Temple, Texas, while I kind of migrate down to Austin and start working down there?
Yeah, I think the big key is that, at the end of the day, it's going to be very expensive to find someone that's going to run the business like you do. If you were to find someone that could do estimates and do all the maintenance and do everything in your business like you would and work just as hard and put in all the time and effort, they're going to be too expensive. And more importantly, they're probably just going to go start their own business. And so you have to start asking yourself, how do I create systems that allow that behavior to be incentivized from a monetarily standpoint to that potential employee? So what I mean by that is, how do I make it to where when they go out and work and I'm not there, that they do still work hard, they still do get the job done. They don't just, go hang out at DQ for 4 hours because they know you're on the other side of the state, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, regardless of the size of the business, but especially if you're a smaller company and you don't have managers, you're going to need to make sure that your employees are on a pay for performance model. So we call it P for P. And it's basically what they're going to get a percentage of the labor revenue every single day. And so that way, when they go out and work, like, hey, if you want to make more money, you can work harder. If you want to take a break and take a nap, that's fine. That's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way you don't have to be constantly worried about, are they being efficient? Are they taking breaks? Are they on their phone all day? And that'll run you crazy if you're on the other side of the state. So I would say the number one thing is to have a pay for performance model where they're getting a percentage of the revenue, so they stay efficient. And then when they're doing other things, because you're not there to do things like estimates or sharpen the blades, et cetera, those things need to have some sort of form of compensation that they're getting in addition to that P for P at some sort of flat model.
That makes sense. I like that a lot. Yeah, I've seen a lot of your videos on P for P. They're super informative. I love those. Keep making those, man. What are some actionable steps you took to kind of enjoy the journey before you got to where you are today, while you were kind of still in the nitty gritty of starting out Augusta?
I think the assumptive part of that question is the fact that the journey is not enjoyable, right? So to say that, how do you enjoy the journey without being overwhelmed or whatever it might be, assumes that the journey you're taking is exhausting. And that it's something you don't do. And there's definitely parts of entrepreneurship that are going to be that way. And that is, you just don't enjoy it and it's not fun. You just kind of put your head down, get it done. But I really believe that, the way to actually make it sustainable, if you want to grow a big business, is you got to figure out the journey, making that part, that is the result, right? I'm not looking for the, in 10, 15 years, this is my finish line. It's a matter of like, hey, I enjoy what I'm doing and I'm working towards something. And the process of getting there is super fun and enjoyable in and of itself. If that's not the case, that's usually what leads to burnout, is because you're constantly like, man, in 10 years and 15 years, well, your body, your mind might not be able to last that long on the amount of strain that you're putting on it. So I would just say, figure out how to make the journey not such a burden.
Okay. Yeah. And I didn't quite mean it like that. I just know that a lot of us entrepreneur type guys sometimes have difficulty, enjoying the journey. And I just wanted some tips on it, but I love that stuff. That's great.
It's not to say that everything's going to be fun or enjoyable, right? Like there's definitely parts I hate about what I do every single day. It's not fun, but it's a matter of, how do I make sure that, like, if I'm going to be in this for 10 or 15 years and I'm growing this business, like, how can I make sure it's something that every day I wake up and like, hey, I'm willing to put in that time and do those things that are enjoyable because the process is something that I love. And I think that's really what sets apart entrepreneurs and then people that just think they want to go self-employed and make more money, quote unquote. Those people usually burn out because the journey, they haven't fell in love with the journey. They're constantly trying to be the carrot before the horse, and that is their quote unquote finish line, which is usually something to do with money.
Yeah, and then the burnout rates, like you said, really high with those type of guys because the incentive's not right in the right place.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So when I start looking at, how big is that water bottle you got over there?
A gallon, man, every single day.
Heck yeah. I got my 49 ouncer right here from Yeti.
That's good. go.
What platforms do you use for kind of social media type stuff? Because I'm on Facebook and Nextdoor right now, and I'm pretty heavily using those to organically grow, and it's been working out for me.
Yeah, or if someone's really small, Nextdoor is going to be one of the best social platforms actually right now because it's so localized. And if, in my opinion, if you have less than 100 customers, you should be thinking about what neighborhoods you're targeting, not what cities, not what towns, not what counties. And so if you have under 100 customers, you should be focused on the 2 or 3 neighborhoods that you really want to penetrate deep into. And with Nextdoor, you can really target just specific neighborhoods. And there's no reason why I can't literally go with my phone to the neighborhoods that I want to target, take a picture of myself in front of their HOA or their building and say, hey, my name is Mike. I'm starting Mike's Mowers. And I'm one of the top providers in this neighborhood, and mention their neighborhood, have a picture of you in their neighborhood, and then target their neighborhood. Like that level of, and that's literally going to cost you $1 or $2 per month to target that neighborhood that way. So when you start really zeroing in on very hyper localized marketing, Nextdoor, in my opinion, is one of the best right now. Google Local Services is definitely the best bang for your buck, but it's going to be less localized, right? So you're going to have a wider service area. You're going to get leads from further away typically. And then Facebook and YouTube are definitely great platforms to get a lot of clicks and a lot of awareness. But again, you're going to get leads from all over the place. It's less localized. And in my opinion, until you're getting over 100 mowing customers on a weekly basis, I'd be focused much more on a couple neighborhoods, not a couple cities or towns.
Yeah, that's kind of what I am now. I do have like a lot of areas kind of available to me. So I'm in like Belton, Temple, Nolanville, a bunch of different kind of places around here. But that's only because I started in Nolanville and kind of transitioned over here. And so I've got customers kind of in both spots. But if I have a day specifically for those locations, I've noticed I could really cut down on the overall cost of like gas and that type of stuff, which is kind of killing us guys right now. So yeah, man, that's awesome. I guess another question I would have for you then, are you 26, 27?
26, yeah.
26. That's awesome that you've gotten so far so quickly. It's just super cool to see. I'm 24. I guess in your early 20s, what's a really good piece of advice for someone maybe listening to this podcast that's trying to start a side hustle or some kind of entrepreneurship gig of their own?
And what age are we assuming?
My kind of ideal market spot for the podcast is age like 23, 24, just got out of college.
Yeah. So, at that stage, if you're trying to do it on the side, it's really a matter of, usually at that stage of life, you're trying to figure out, do I do this full time or I do this on the side, or do I just do this until I make more money at my job kind of thing, like supplementing my income. And so I think if you're trying to figure out, a side hustle, it's a matter of like, don't abandon your main job, right? Like don't jump into, if you just came out of college or you're, even just got out of high school and you can go make $20 an hour someplace working some sort of trade, or you got a marketing gig or something like that, I would not abandon that and be like, I'm just gonna go start mowing lawns. Like I would just start on the weekend, right? Do it on Saturday, Sunday, mow on in the evenings, and until you can easily get 20, 30 mowing customers and handle that workload on the weekends and in the afternoons, in the evenings, around your course load if you're in college. So I would really focus on that. And then when you do that, then you start opening up opportunities. You're like, man, I got like 5 people calling me a day. I got 30 lawns. I'm maxed out. Well, now if I go full time 1 year, I'll probably go from 30 lawns to 100 lawns like that. And that looks very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So I'd just be really focusing on, hey, what is every single moment of downtime that I can fill with projects and with work, and then potentially even have someone help me on the weekends. Now I'll get 40 or 50 lawns just being done part-time, but now all of a sudden 50 lawns, I'm making 8, 9, 10 grand a month in revenue, and in profit I'm making 5, 6,000. Well, now it becomes a really debatable topic as to whether I go full-time at this, right? So building that kind of runway is really helpful, especially if you have dependents or a family that you kind of got to make sure you have all your T's crossed and I's dotted before you jump into the business.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. I like that a lot, especially the part about keeping your job before you start the other one. Because I've noticed that with moving here down to Texas, I had to have a side job, maybe sometimes 2 side jobs to help sustain what this business costs before you can get it up and going. And also you need to learn a lot of lessons by making a lot of mistakes through that process as well. So yeah, I would advise listeners, that's a really, really key piece of information there that I've had to learn sometimes the hard way.
I think if profitability is important to you, not just scalability, and you're really trying to, hey, I need to take money out for a family or have expenses. That's when you don't go from the 30 lawns to going full time. What you actually do is you take a year and you raise prices substantially to keep the amount of lawns down to 30 or 40, but now you're gonna make twice as much profit. right? So if you're charging average, $30 per cut on those 30 lawns that you're doing on the side, well, before you go like, man, should I go full time? I don't know if if you're on the edge, just take one more year, raise all those prices to $45, and immediately your profits will not just double, like they'll triple or quadruple because of that profit. So it's not a bad idea to do that too, especially if you need that profit to live on. Now, if you're trying to grow, and it's all about expansion, you'd probably jump into full-time sooner, even if your prices aren't necessarily where they need to be at.
Yeah. That's awesome. Of your locations, kind of what was the first area that you targeted and why did you choose that area?
You mean in terms of the franchise?
Yeah, of Augusta. Yeah.
Yeah, we targeted all of the US at first. So we basically got everything set up to where we could be anywhere, any of the states. So the very first one was in Colorado, just outside Denver, Colorado. But yeah, then really the first 10 were all from different states. And then from now we have just on most of the states, we have a location now.
Okay, nice. So you're like probably what, 47 or 48 or so states?
I don't think so. I think some of the Midwest ones, we don't have anyone in those states yet.
Okay, gotcha. That's still really cool though, man. So are you traveling around most of the week then?
Not to all the different locations outside the state. I mostly stay inside the kind of the corporate side of things to help with what we call command centers. So we help take all their calls, do all their emails, their back end work for the franchisees. So that's really the biggest time suck. And we have a virtual team as well that we hire to do that. But that's kind of the biggest thing, to try to scale and the infrastructure behind it all, and be able to absorb thousands of calls a day and things like that. That's where most of my time is spent.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess another thing for me personally, I've had a lot of tough times trying to, I guess, self-motivate kind of once I get into this point where I can't share any of my successes with people around me that would understand exactly what's going on. And I feel like, from your perspective as well, sometimes it seems a bit lonely in the entrepreneurship world. How is there, what's a good way that you've come up with to be able to mitigate that problem a little bit?
Again, I know I kind of tear it apart, but I wouldn't look at it as a problem, right? Because at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, we made the bed, it's time to sleep in it, right? So if I'm going to decide to become an entrepreneur, I can't complain about some of the collateral damage that's going to create in other quote unquote relationships I might see valuable. Now, if I don't want to, if I want to scale things back, if I want to go hang out, whatever, I can do that. That's my choice, right? So to say that's a problem, I feel like it's not taking ownership of the fact that as an entrepreneur, you have the choice. You made that decision, right? And so if someone else is going to judge me or is going to think differently of me because they're in my family or inside circle, well, that's fine. I made that choice. It's my fault, right? If it's always someone else's fault, they don't understand. They don't understand why I'm doing this. Well, then I'm kind of out of control, right? I have never have control over what's going on in my life. So I don't like to live in a place like that. I like to take ownership of everything that's going wrong, because as soon as you don't, you feel like a victim and you feel cornered. And so even though that you would say, hey, other people don't understand me, I would say, look, I made the decision. I made the decision that, to live a life a certain way, and people are going to misunderstand me, and that's my decision, right? Ultimately.
Yeah. And I think too, when you start to have that perspective and that mindset, it really helps with solving problems and getting good at solving problems, because you realize there's a lot of problems that are inflicted by me, at least to some degree. So I really like that a lot. That's good stuff.
And a lot of times we'll kind of take out the lows of entrepreneurship, and that is the fact that if I can take ownership of everything that is going wrong, that means I have some control over it, right? So for example, people will say, well, gas prices are high, can't find anyone to work for me, therefore I'm not going to start my business, or I'm going to I was unsuccessful last year because of X, Y, and Z. Well, if you constantly are pushing off to somebody else, whether that be in a personal relationship, whether it be economics, in business, whatever it is, if you're constantly pushing off on some other exterior source of information or circumstances, well, then you're never in control. You're basically at the whim of whatever's going on in the economy, whatever's going on in the labor market, whatever's going on in your family, whatever, someone got on the right side of the bed. I don't want to be in that position, right? And so I think taking ownership of it means I have the ability to change it, and that comes from a place of power. And in my opinion, someone will be much more settled when things are going awry if they take that stance, instead of feeling like they're a victim. And this is why so many people in our society, in my opinion, feel so trapped, or they feel victimized, or that they're being the word is discriminated now is because they feel out of control, right? When in reality, if you actually step back, yes, there's things that are unfair, there's things that go against us, there's things that people misunderstand us in. But if we actually stepped up and said, hey, I'm taking control of those things and it's because of me, well, immediately I have control over the situation. And then it just changes your whole mindset.
I agree. And that perspective change happened. Well, it started to happen. I'm still working on it as I moved down here and started this whole thing. And I can totally see kind of that those changes starting to happen in my life from when I used to work a sales job. I used to always think like, oh, this thing's happening to me. This thing's happening to me. But it's really like I have a portion of this, to blame on myself as well. So I got to think about it. But yeah, I really like that stuff a lot. I watched your video recently in preparation for this interview to try to learn up a little bit more on spring startups and how to get really going good in the spring, because you said that it's like really the busiest time for lawn care guys. And as I'm seeing in my first spring here, it really is. I've been getting calls off the hook and a lot of people wanting their lawns cut. So I guess other than that video that I watched, the most recent one you did on it, what is some good tips for me as I'm kind of heading into spring season?
Like the thing to realize is that your customer acquisition cost is inverse of demand. So what that means is if demand is really high and everyone wants your services, customer acquisition cost, or the amount of money I need to spend in marketing to get one customer, is at its lowest point. And so what's important to realize about that is that most people in lawn care and landscaping, we spend our marketing dollars when we're not busy. Well, when we're not busy is also when demand is the lowest. But when demand is the lowest, it means our customer acquisition cost is the highest. So people that say, oh, marketing doesn't work, or I don't spend any more money on marketing, typically it's because they don't spend money during the spring rush. So we typically, if we're going to spend money on marketing, we want to spend 60 to 70% of that in a 2 to 3 month window, which we call spring rush, because that's when our customer acquisition cost is going to be the lowest. Now that's great in theory when you look at the graph, but what's hidden in all of that is during the spring rush is also when you're trying to train up new employees. The grass is growing fastest. You're running behind on estimates. Like all of that starts to compound. And so what typically happens is people cut marketing, or they're like, okay, no more estimates, no more new customers. But then all of a sudden they're spending money on marketing in the middle of August because now their mowing is slowed down. So I think it comes down to planning and the ability to say, look, I expect this number of many customers, so I'm going to build the infrastructure during the winter before the spring rush starts, so that during the spring rush, I can actually spend the bulk of my marketing dollars, because that's when I'm going to get the best bang for my buck. Right. So that's what I would typically say is the biggest catalyst to someone's growth and whether or not they really expand, because you can really triple your business during a spring rush if you treat it correctly, if you plan for it and you spend your marketing dollars during that time. So I'd say that's usually the Achilles heel of most landscapers in terms of why they don't grow, is they just market at the wrong time, and they don't market during the right time because they're so overwhelmed with work and they haven't built the infrastructure to handle that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So I guess with the part about spending most of your marketing dollars during that time, I've been focusing a lot on trying to do yard signs this year because they worked for me really well at the tail end of last year. So I guess with that, yard signs for me costed $24 per yard sign, and that was at ordering like 4 or 5 of them at a time. So what are some ways I can cut down on those costs? Because it's pretty expensive to be ordering yard signs at 24 a piece,
Yeah, I would make sure in that case that you're only using it for your localized marketing. If you're going to do 4 or 5 yard signs, the chances of that actually driving a meaningful impact from a branding perspective is very low, unless you really go after those localized markets of, okay, I'm going after these 3 neighborhoods. I'm going to put yard signs on all the main corridors going into these neighborhoods, because I'm typically not going to be able to get inside of them, people residential, but I can put them on the on the entrance, or like across the street from the entrance, or in a ditch that everyone passes by. And then I would parlay that with things like door hangers, next door, every door direct mail, which would also be very localized to those 3 neighborhoods. That's how you take a small budget and really make it impactful, is you spend it in a very, very, very tight area and demographically really restrict your radius. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And so you said with being really tight in your radius, send in multiple forms of paper type marketing where it's like visible and physical.
Yeah, like, a lot of people watch some videos that were made about 10, 15 years ago on YouTube about, sending multiple flyers or multiple postcards to people in the mail. And they say, hey, send it 8, 10 times. And I think that there's definitely validity to that. However, I also believe that if I could take those same, let's say 5 or 6 touches that I touch a customer with, and put one in their door on their doorknob, a door hanger. One, I knock on their door and I actually still get my face. Then I'm showing up in their post office box, or like their mailbox. Then I'm showing up across the street on a yard sign. Then I'm showing up on a flyer that they put out their local community center. Like, if you constantly are touching them, then they go online, they see me on Nextdoor, then they see me on Facebook, then they get an email. Like, if all those touches, in my opinion, a multifaceted approach is going to be much more impactful than just pounding door hangers or pounding yard signs or pounding, just postcards and flyers being mailed. So in my opinion, trying to just touch them from multiple different angles instead of the same method of delivery is important.
Mhm. And once I get into a neighborhood specific, when I'm keeping this tight radius, I find oftentimes that a lot of the guys like see me mowing, and they'll just, come over from their neighbors or somewhere else and ask me to, start mowing over there. And during that time, I'm thinking, well, how many more customers do I need in this neighborhood that I need to advertise to specifically? Because I'm getting a lot just from word of mouth and people seeing my yard signs, my truck, all that kind of stuff.
And so you asked them like how much more you should be marketing in a neighborhood you already have a few clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Because like at what point do you switch to a new neighborhood and be like, okay, I'm going to start, marketing to this one now? Because,
I would say most will just do that too soon, right?
Okay.
And when I think about 2-3 neighborhoods, I'd say a maximum of 500, 600, 700 houses if you're trying to get your first 30, 40 million customers. Now, obviously, if you're going to hit market penetration and saturation at the point where, if you have 100 houses, you're not going to probably get 90 of those lawns. So if you're trying to grow big, you're eventually going to have to expand. But I think people do that too soon. And so, especially if you go into a nice neighborhood where 50% of the houses have a professional service come in and do it for them. Well, why can't I have 20% of that market share, i.e. only 10% of the houses? So if there's 1,000 houses, I should be able to get 100 of them, right? If you run the math. And so, that would be 500 lawns are being done by professionals. And if I get 20% market share, that's 100 lawns.
Yeah.
So if you start running the numbers on it like that, then it's like, why would you ever go into another neighborhood if there's other competition that's in those neighborhoods and there's a lot of it? And if you only have 5 or 6% market share inside a neighborhood, like I would be going all in on that neighborhood until if I have like 60, 70% penetration inside of a neighborhood, like probably time to move on. Because it's going to be hard to sell those other 20 or 30%. They've been with the same person for 50 years.
Yeah.
So that's when I would move on. But most people do that far too soon, I think, because if I can stay in the one neighborhood, I might only have 1 or 2 trucks. But if I can not only be marketing that neighborhood, but also they're seeing me every single day because I'm only in that neighborhood. Well, now all of a sudden they think that you have 50 trucks because they see you all the time. And every single day they're seeing you. Well, they see you every single day because you're in their neighborhood every single day. And it's just 1 or 2 trucks.
Yeah.
So the goal is always to switch from direct marketing where you're asking, direct response marketing where you're asking for the sale. You're call us now or fill out this form or whatever it is. That's direct response marketing. As soon as you can switch into branding where people call you because they've affiliated that service with your name, when they think of lawn care, like, instead of thinking, oh, I gotta go Google it, they think, oh, Augusta Lawn Care. Like I see them all the time. Well, then now you've achieved brand. And once you've achieved brand, then your customer acquisition costs will sink dramatically. And traditionally, that's going to happen once you have 10, 15, 20 trucks in a city. But if I'm going after one single neighborhood or 2 or 3 neighborhoods, and every single day I'm in that neighborhood, well, now the residents of that neighborhood literally see me every single day. And I don't have to pay a bunch of money to get touches because they see me all the time with my truck. And so this is why it's so important, in my mind, to paint your truck or get decals on them. So that way, when you get in these small little neighborhoods, they really do see you every single day and they notice you. And that's the equivalent of a touch. Right. Yeah. So instead of sending 8 times of the same postcard, I'd rather them to see me 7 times last week. Right. And then I send them 1 postcard and that converts them because all that brand was built up and then I cashed in on it with direct response marketing.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's a mouthful right there, but you had that response ready to go. I liked it. I like it a lot. What was, okay. So I guess wrapping up here, what was like your most important lesson learned from seeing all these franchises start? And like, what was like their biggest problem as you see kind of, you've seen 87, you said locations start. So what's the biggest, most common problem for guys starting out in their first year?
You're following the systems, right? Like as entrepreneurs, we always like tinkering with things. And so as for the franchisees, we give a pretty clear, hey, this is how we recommend things be done. And it's easy when the battle gets hot and when things are happening and employees are walking off jobs and customers are screaming your face to start getting outside the systems because you think there's a better way. And so when we see it this many times, we kind of know what to expect. We know what the end result of a specific action or getting off the systems is going to be. And so I would say the biggest flaw for most entrepreneurs is that we do like to constantly just change, to create change for whatever reason. Like there's no strategy behind it, just a matter of, well, I'm going to change the way I do my estimates. I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that. Well, if you constantly are tinkering with the systems that work, you're never going to see any sort of result. And so with Augusta, we have systems in place for them to achieve a certain result. And we've seen it happen and happen and happen. And so typically what happens is the first year or two, it takes them to realize, okay, look, if I just follow the systems, I'll get the result, right? I don't need to like figure all this stuff out. And so that's why someone would join a franchise, is because those systems are laid out. But for the average person that might not have those systems in place, then it's a matter of like, well, you got to go learn, right? You got to listen to podcasts like yours to be able to learn and grow, and then stick to the systems that work for someone else. If they work for someone else, it's probably going to work for you. You're not like, everyone always thinks, oh, my state is different and our climate is different. My mowers are different. It's like, no, it's the same stuff. Business is universal.
Yeah.
Marketing is the same. And I know that there's pockets of markets that react differently to certain things. But to say that, P4P doesn't work in my market is stupid. To say that, a website is not important in my market is stupid. So there's certain universal parts of business that I think some people try to circumnavigate by saying, oh, like it's different in my market, and therefore I'm not going to listen to either systems that have been placed by, a franchisor, or potentially even just someone that they hear constantly is hearing the same thing from on a place like a podcast like this.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that multifaceted answer. What are there any things you want to kind of plug into, this podcast so that people can kind of connect with you in certain spots, or a certain new promotion you're running in a certain state or anything like that?
Not really. I think the main thing is, I really think that the biggest issue for someone growing their business right now past 1 or 2 trucks is going to be the labor side of things. And so, a lot of what I'm talking about right now on my channel for YouTube and things like that is trying to figure that out. And that's why we created p4psoftware.com. And we have all the training on there is for free. So someone can go on there, p4psoftware.com/training, and learn about what pay for performance is. But tying this kind of full circle back to the original question, and that is the whole idea of creating systems in your business and pay and compensation for labor is something that we've kind of figured out in terms of giving a percentage of that to the employee to keep them motivated. And so I would say figure that out. I don't care if you use our software, that's up to you, but figure out how to be able to do that so you can keep your workforce motivated and you don't have to micromanage them, because that's the most painful part about running a business usually.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I would push the listeners too, even if you're not, an entrepreneur type mind, still try to learn about P4P and what it does, because it kind of truly evaluates how much a position is worth and how much someone's time is worth, and helps you figure out how much you're worth at your own job, right? So you may be asking for a raise after you learn more about P4P. But yeah, so I loved having you on, Mike. It was super great to get you in this quick, and I know I reached out to you yesterday, and now here we are talking, so it's awesome. But I will respect the rest of your time and let you get back to work. But I've loved having you on the Young Blooded podcast. And remember, guys, money in your 20s is knowledge for life.